Ross Monaghan had a £250,000 price tag on his head over a feud with the Spanish drugs cartel linked to the south of England, it's been claimed. The Lions senior gang member was shot dead along with Eddie Lyons Jr. in the Costa del Sol last weekend in a brutal hit in Fuengirola. Sources say threats had been made in the months leading up to Saturday's double execution, but it wasn't the first time that someone had tried to kill Monaghan. 8 years ago, he was lucky to escape after an attempt on his life in broad daylight. Well, in January 2017, it was just like any other day here in Penilee as parents took their children to school. But little did they know there was a gunman lying in wait. He had a kid's buggy, and within that he had a firearm, and then honed in on his target, Ross Monaghan, firing 2 shots, one hitting him in the shoulder, the other missing. Monaghan was wearing a bulletproof vest at the time and quickly fled to Spain following the attack, but it quickly showed just how big a player he was becoming and becoming a marked man, which ultimately led to his death just 8 years later. Mark Richardson and Martin Fitzsimmons were both tried, then cleared of the gangland hit on Monaghan at the time. Monaghan had previously been cleared of killing Kevin Gerbil Carroll after a judge ruled there was insufficient evidence to convict him, and that may have led to the attack on him while he dropped his kid off at school. The Gerbil was a feared Daniels clan enforcer known for extreme violence to anyone who got in his way or crossed him. Carroll's earliest brush with the law came in 2004 when he was charged with attempted murder. He was accused of shooting John Madden, a pal of Eddie Lyons Sr., with an AK-47, but the case later collapsed. Carroll, who was from Milton, first then made the headlines in 2006 when he was hit in the stomach in a drive-by shooting. It was not the first time he had been shot. But it was an event that came to sum up the drugs feud that may have cost him his life 4 years later. Carroll and associate Ross Sherlock were hit at 10 p.m. one evening as they stood talking to others at the roadside in Bishop Briggs next to their BMW X5, a favourite set of wheels for criminals at the time. Nobody has been charged with that crime, which left Carroll fighting for his life in Glasgow Royal Infirmary under the guard of armed police. But it was widely seen as a key episode in a violent tit-for-tat feud between 2 North Glasgow drug gangs, the Lions and the Daniels. And the Gerbil was finally shot dead in the Asda car park in Rob Royston in January 2010 in an attack that took just 25 seconds. He had been careful given the previous attempts on his life, but this time was relaxed and for once wasn't wearing his bulletproof vest. A car pulled up just before 1:30 in the afternoon. 2 gunmen got out and fired 13 shots into the back of the Gerbil's Audi A3 as stunned shoppers looked on. Monaghan was arrested in July that year and put on trial for the gangland hit, but he denied all charges against him and lodged a special defence of incrimination against 8 people. The trial collapsed due to insufficient evidence. Eddie Lyons Jr., Stephen Lyons and Ross Monaghan all grew up in Milton. In 2000, the Lyons family had infiltrated a publicly funded community centre in the area. They took control of the Churnside Community Initiative, which received over £1.4 million in taxpayer funding and turned out to be a front for organised crime and laid the groundwork for a bloody feud with the rival Daniel crime clan. Eddie's father ended up in the dock after he admitted racking up more than £250,000 in mortgage frauds by giving lenders fake income details. In April 2016, Eddie Jr. and Monaghan later appeared before the same court, but were cleared of a vicious street attack on 3 men outside a bar in East Dunbartonshire, which took place in April 2016. But the trial collapsed when 2 of the alleged victims said they had no memory of what happened to them. After the attempt on his life outside the school in Penilee, Monaghan fled to Spain, and he struck up a relationship with the Irish Kinahan crime cartel. Monaghan is said to have been instrumental in building an alliance between the Lyons family and the world's most wanted gang when he boldly approached godfather Daniel Kinahan several years ago. He formed a relationship with a global mob boss that has prevailed ever since, giving the Lyons extra power and control over Scotland's illegal drug trade. One man who knows the Kinahans well is the Irish Sun crime editor, Stephen Breen.
We do know that from my colleague and I, John Hand, were researching our book, Kinahan Assassins, that the name Ross Monaghan had cropped up in terms of someone who had connections to Thomas Bomber Kavanagh. He's now serving time for drug trafficking, but again, it shows you the Kinahan reach. The tentacles are spread far and wide, so it's entirely feasible that because of their connections that the Kinahan have to criminal groupings in Scotland and England, that their resources could be called upon to wage war against these individuals. We were doing research for the book. His name came up in terms of having meetings around 2016, 2017 with the Kinahan organization, because the Kinahan organization had a branch in the UK, and the CEO of that branch was Thomas Bomber Kavanagh, and he was meeting individuals from Glasgow, from Liverpool, from Birmingham, from London, and it was all about the wholesale trafficking of drugs into the UK. But of course, at that time, even though the CEO of the Kinahan group was still actively involved in drug trafficking, they were still involved in a deadly gangland turf war, and they were still involved in killing people. So when things like this happen, you always have organized crime groups calling on their associates, calling on their resources and their contacts across Europe for help in if a gangland war takes place. And certainly it's very possible that this could happen on this occasion, although the Kinahans have been fairly decimated by the investigations of the Irish authorities in targeting those who were prepared to take up the gun on their behalf.
But while Monaghan had a meteoric rise to the top of the Lion's crew and somehow managed to avoid going to jail and being killed, it was almost a matter of time for someone like him operating at the highest level. And that day came last Saturday in the Costa del Sol, when he was watching the Champions League final with Eddie Lyons Jr. in his own bar in Fuengirola. A masked gunman shot Lyons Jr. dead outside the pub before turning his attention to Monaghan, who was shot several times as he tried to scramble for cover as terrified customers and staff hid under tables and chairs. And it's believed Monaghan may have had a £250,000 price tag on his head over a feud with a Spanish drugs cartel linked to the south of England.